Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Donjo. This is their part number 261 PB-V. That's just the packaging. Actually, this is the V part of the part number, visual packaging, versus the typical, this would just be a 261 PB and it would come in a box. Why you would want the V? Well, quite frankly, this client, I don't believe, would want that at all. It's going to apparently just an apartment building in Wisconsin. Visual pack you would want if you're going to display it. So hardware stores, locksmiths, retail, hardware, places where you might source such a piece of equipment where they want to display that. You'd use a V for visual pack. If it's available without a visual pack, I would encourage you to do that because generally it's slightly less expensive because this plastic's more expensive generally. Anyway, the bottom line is it's a 261 is what this is. It happens to be a PB for polished brass, but it's a 261 is what it is. You can have this 261 in stainless steel, polished brass, probably antique brass, a dark brown powder coat that they call 10B or oil rubbed bronze, which it's not. It's just a powder coated finish. And that's what this is. So the 261 in the part number specifically means the dimensional properties of the item. When you change that number, you're changing the size, the door thickness, the width, the height, the preparations, the location of those preparations, how the edge is treated. So everything is based on it being literally a 261. So a 261 is 9-inch tall. It's 4-inch wide. It's for an 1 3/4 inch thick door. It is 2 3/8 back set. It is for 2 holes that are 2 1/8 that are 3 5/8 on center. That's exactly what this is for. Very typical, very common that you would have exterior door, 1 3/4 inch, that makes sense. Even 2 3/8 back set, that makes sense. If the door is maybe from the 1970s, probably very common. Having a lock and a deadbolt, 3 5/8 centers, very typical as well. 2 1/8 inch hole, sure, nothing unusual about any of this. The edge is prepped for the latch bolts to fit into. You can do a VF model, which would give you only a double D prep in the edge of the plate itself. It would not be mortised or recessed back with these threaded insert nuts that are here. It would literally be when you would have the latch bolts already attached to the door, but you're wrapping that U-plate over it to obviously mitigate some damage, very occasionally for an aesthetic change. But you don't have a problem with the latch bolts being in the securely attached to the edge of the door. But you're going to have some problem on the face of the door, I would think. So, however, when you have more substantial damage, where the edge of the door has been cracked, and there's nothing for the latch bolt to attach to, you're going to want this type, the non-VF type, because you're going to screw those latch bolts right to the plate. The plate and its latch and the latch bolts will go onto the door as a unified unit. Okay. Now I find when needing to install one of these units onto a door that you can expect some rather substantial prep work in order to get the hardware installed down onto the door, because the original door and frame was not built to accommodate the thickness of this item or the preparation size on the back of the plate when you put it to the edge of the door. You'll find as soon as you put it on there, the door is probably not going to close. So you're going to have to contend with that when you have substantial damage. I have found one time I did installed a reinforcing a door reinforcer that I had to clean out a lot of the door. The door had been forcefully broken into, had split open on the edge, and there were pieces of wood that I had to pull out so I could bring the door back down together. Depending on what time you have available to you to do the repair, you might want to be able to clean all of that out, get the door into a position where you can get it down on its side, clean all of that out, glue parts back together, maybe even do some mitigation work like what would be a Dutchman, where you would clear that area out and then put some wood back into it to give it some structural integrity. Glue it back together, clamp it, so let that set overnight, then clean off whatever you've done. And by the way, if you're gluing, use wax paper. Put wax paper over the door itself before you put your blocks of wood if you're going to clamp. Any glue that will squeeze out of there, you don't want that glue between the face of the door and your wood block, because as soon as you pull that wood block off, your finish is coming with you. So you don't want to do that. So wax paper is really, back in the old days when we had a very large wood shop with 12 people and lots of machinery, we would have rolls of wax paper at all times. 10 rolls at all times. Anyway, expect to have to do some mitigation work, clearing out the area, hogging out what is damaged, making it clear so that you can put the door back together. Then you want to dry fit. Once you've got this down as tight to the edge of the door as you can, dry fit the door, make sure it works. If it doesn't, mitigate that problem. You might, if you've got that door down, get a template and then run your router over the edge of the door and just skim off that 50 thousandths of an inch. I would probably skim a little more than 50 thousandths if you want it flush. And this material is probably 50 thousandths thick, would be my guess. Well, it's about 35 thousandths, but it's not exactly flat over here. So you're going to need to, if it was me, I would probably mortise 50 thousandths off. I would then dry fit again. I would test if I'm going to try to make this as flush as possible. I might need to do that. Plus, also you have a situation where the face of the stop, when the door gets into the closed position, this is the face of the stop. The margin between the face of the door and the face of the stop was not built to account for this. That's probably not going to be such a big deal. But nonetheless, installing these is not a quick, fast, and easy thing unless you just do a quick, fast, and easy. If you want the door to operate as close to original as possible, expect to invest some time. That's what I'm driving at. Dry fit it. Make any accommodations that you need to make when you're installing it. When I pre-drill these holes, I like to put them at a very slight angle. Well, first of all, I'll get this onto the door. Door's open at 90 degrees, and I'll have a couple of pony clamps. And a pony clamp, the name Pony or Jorgensen is a name that goes back decades and decades and decades. A Chicago area, literally in the city proper, I believe somewhere Damon and Grand Avenue, or Western and Grand. They were located right near there. It's a clamp that will allow you to use regular black, I think 3/4 diameter pipe, or maybe 1 inch. A couple of blocks of wood, put a pony clamp down along the width of the door so that you can get this as tight as possible to the edge of the door. Then screw, make your holes to get the fasteners, which by the way are included, like a truss head style screw and a complementary finish. And by the way, those latch bolts, we have some 832 machine screws and a complementary finish as well to get those latch bolts installed. That's going to accommodate an 1.125" wide plate, but I would expect 1.125" by 2.25" is what it is. 2.25", 1.125". I would expect that you're going to have 1 inch wide plates, however, because of this 2 3/8 back set. Get that pony clamp, get the unit down as tight as possible, pre-drill your holes. While you've got it in place, bring it home, run the screws into it once they're pre-drilled, and you should be in good shape at that point. You might need to clean out the 2 1/8 holes a little bit as well, because adding this on may not be exactly fitting over the existing 2 1/8 inch holes. It can be a lot of work. These little semicircles that you see, there's no need to have them really at 12 and 6. You will see them, of course, at 9 and 3, and that's because locks will have small little tangs or teats that are meant to bite into the face of a wood door. It's an anti-rotation sort of feature to locks, all locks really. And without that preparation at 9 and 3, you'd say, my lock doesn't fit down onto the face of the door. I've installed locks onto even metal clad doors, very light gauge doors that didn't have that preparation, to the point where I've had to drill a very small hole to account for that. So that's where you're going to end up using this. Let's switch to the screen view. Before we do that, this is a PB, polished brass. This is made of solid brass. This is polished finish, and that scratched appearance that you see is only the peel-away protective coating on this. I've had clients call me and say, what you've sent me is thoroughly damaged, used, and scratched. I says, hold on. What did I send you? And it doesn't happen with this material, but it happens with specimen pass-through cabinets. To the point where the manufacturers of that material, especially one in particular, went to an opaque peel-away film because you couldn't tell it was on there, but it looked scratched. So anyway, that scratched surface you see is just the peel-away protective film. Let's switch to the screen view now and take a closer look at some supporting documentation. Here is the item that we are looking at, the 261V visual pack in a PB finish. For double lock combination units with 2 1/8 holes, 3 5/8 centers, 1 3/4 door at 2 3/8 back set, 22 gauge, that's probably about 35 thousandths. 605 polished brass and 4x9. 605 means three things. It means it's made of solid brass, that it is in a polished finish and has a clear coat lacquer applied over that polishing. Now there are some documents over here. There's a template, a product catalog. Let's look at the template first. It's just a technical drawing, and it alludes to the different finishes: polished brass, antique brass, bronze, oil rub bronze, and stainless steel. That 10B is going to be a powder-coated dark brown finish over stainless, is what that's going to be. CW in this part number means commercial wrap. They used to have another term. I don't recall what it was to mean that it was a residential wrap. There may have been a time when they had a thinner material than 22 gauge or whatever they called it out earlier. But nonetheless, here are all the dimensional properties. This appears to be exactly correct. Then there's the link to the product catalog here. Now this is handy because you might say to yourself, well, I have no idea if I need a 261. Well, this is going to be the document that will show you everything related to door reinforcing wraparound plates from Danjo. So I just did a find function on my keyboard for 261, and I got to the page where you can see it. Generally, what happens on these charts is you'll have items that are all but identical, grouped together. So 1 3/4 door, well, 2 3/8, yep, I need 2 3/4 for 1 3/4. Well, it's a 481 is what that part number is. Then they have a 151, which would be for an 1 3/8 door. Going through this catalog, if we scroll back up to the top, you'll be able to initiate your review of all such wraparound plates from Danjo. A very comprehensive offering. There's really not been, there have been instances when Danjo did not have the item that we required directly as a direct part number, but they're able to fabricate it as a custom product. I think I had a client one time who had an extremely unusual back set, and I don't recall, but we were able to quote it to the client. He needed 75 of them that were at some very strange back set. You know, like I was in disbelief that it actually existed. The client was quite sure that it did. I had never heard of a lock with this unusual back set. It was strange. Different centers to centers on these lock and deadbolt combinations: 1 1/2 hole, 5 1/2 centers, 3 5/8 we were talking about earlier, 4 centers, 6 centers, blank plates. Very occasionally a client will call and say, yeah, I need a door reinforcing plate and I've got this so-and-so lock. Well, no, Danjo does not make a pre-manufactured unit for that type of lock. Maybe exactly a unit lock. You'd have to go back to the 1950s to really see unit locks, although they're still made today. Corbin Russwin calls them unit locks. I think Yale calls them something else. Since I have piqued your curiosity, let's take a look at what a unit lock is. I don't recall what Yale calls them. Monolock is what Yale calls them, a monolock. These locks were very common 100 years ago, 75 years ago, for sure 100 years ago, a monolock. The monolock is just this very large prep here, this very large piece of equipment. So the prep in the edge of the door is actually quite simple. It's just a notch. And while you still have to prep the door, it's an easy lock to prep for. I don't see a... Let's take a look at a template to illustrate locks. Doesn't fit into any of these categories. That's the prep. This is a metal door preparation for a template for a monolock, but it's just this notch. Okay. Older unit locks would not have required that 2 1/8 inch hole. Corbin Russwin has their, I think it's a UT 5200. Unit locks right there. Now that's a traditional unit lock prep. That's what I'm used to seeing. It could be that this is a way to modify an existing door that already has a 161 prep in it. But this is what a unit lock looks like. That template was drawn 27 years ago. You can see how often it changes. Unit lock. Anyway, so no, they don't have a prep for a unit lock, but you would be able to buy a blank one and kind of do it yourself. That wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. The factory can also manufacture them. You wouldn't want to ask them to make you one or two because that unit price would be pretty spectacularly expensive because of the setup time. Anyway, you get the point. Longer units, both preparations and blank. Specific lock preparations are here. That continues on for several pages. Converting a unit lock to a lever lock. That's what I was scrolling for. I knew they could go the other way. But they don't go from... They don't go the other way, but they can take away a unit lock and put on a cylindrical lock. By the way, this prep, we would call that a turtle prep. If you really use your imagination, you could see why we'd call it a turtle prep. Additional plates, etc. Now that VF, the flat style I had mentioned, it just looks like that. Okay. That's where the damage to the edge of the door is not so severe. Interior wrap, that's what it was, an IW, not a CW. They don't, you can ignore all of this. I've spoken to the factory on IWs and they've said don't pay any attention to it. Who knows what it was. I doubt it would have been thinner, but it's the only thing that I could think of. So the link below this video here to the manufacturer's page, that's going to allow you to pull up not only all of the Danjo products that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog, but the subsections of that catalog. And if you know the name Danjo at all, you do for their latch protectors, their wraparound plates that we're looking at now. They do other items. They do custom strike plates. If you have a need for a extended lip strike plate, Danjo probably has an off-the-shelf solution. They do latches and bolts. They do hinges. They do ladder pulls, other items. They also have, the year now is 2020 and pandemic is front and center. They've introduced antimicrobial coatings, which can be reviewed here. You can buy this Copper Zone. These are sheets that can be applied to existing hardware. Field applied or factory applied to Danjo products. Anything you want, you'll be able to put that copper plate onto. Copper coat, you probably want to take a look at all of that. Okay, let's wrap up this video on camera. In conclusion, the name Danjo is synonymous with this product line, door reinforcing wraparound plates. They're not the only company who makes them. I wouldn't say that there are lots of companies that do, but there is no company that has a more comprehensive of product offering than they do. They've got, 15 pages of variations of this material. So keep them in mind. Now, why would you buy this in the first place? Well, the reason you would is because it's the lesser of two evils, meaning I've had clients call and say, yeah, I had to kick the door in because I got locked out. Ooh, how bad is it? Pretty bad. Okay, you got two options, reinforcing plate or a new door. Well, a new door is not going to work because this door is made in 1927. It's a 5 horizontal panel door. That's solid lumber, and it would have been in 1927 because veneer technology didn't exist, I think, until the mid-20th century. And the lesser of two evils is putting this on the door. You know, it's solid lumber. It can be repaired. It's just, you know, a weekend warrior can generally do this. Most weekend warriors don't own... They have the mental and physical ability to do it, but they don't have the investment in tools to do it. So generally something like this that you can put on with a hammer and a chisel and a electric drill and a screwdriver is the lesser of two evils. So that's why people will look at these. If you have any questions on the Danjo 261 or any other Danjo product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.